Kizwe nkosi ube nomsakimi samkhululi woza umoya wami ufisa wena samkhululi woza kizulile kude sithabeni kizulile kude Ngilejwe sibayeni samkhululi woza asiko isiphephelo sami samkhululi woza ngithole ukukhanya samkhululi woza kizulile kude mangithathe baba ngilejwe sibayeni samkhululi woza indlela iyangikhathaza samkhululi woza abeke uthando samkhululi woza kizulile sithabeni kizulile kude nekhaya ngilejwe sibayeni samkhululi woza ukuzisola kwami samkhululi woza ukukhuleka kwami samkhululi woza kizulile kude sithabeni kizulile kude ekhaya ngilejwe sibayeni samkhululi woza ngizulile kude sithabeni kizulile kude ekhaya ngilejwe sibayeni samkhululi woza ngizulile kude sithabeni ngizulile kude ekhaya ngilejwe sibayeni samkhululi woza samkhululi wami woza unonetha moyo wako yere muze Jesu unasuwane urombo yere muze Jesu yeka Jesu shamari wazikanwa wakuchina umwe wakadaro muze Jesu yeka masonzi ari kudona yere muze Jesu Jesu muneshite mazawikwa ere Muze Jesu eka Muze Jesu shamari wazikanwa Akuchina umwe wakadaro Muze Jesu eka Muri kuchada muzoro ere Muze Jesu iye ucha kubatsira iwe Muze Jesu eka Muze Jesu shamari wazikanwa Akuchina umwe wakadaro Muze Jesu eka Wacharufu luno uya here Muze Jesu unadisa umambo wa Jesu Muze Jesu eka Muze Jesu shamari wazikanwa Akuchina umwe wakadaro Muze Jesu eka Muze Jesu shamari wazikanwa Akuchina umwe wakadaro Muze Jesu eka
Happy Sabbath and welcome to our afternoon service. I am your host, Amanda Mutsingwa, and with me are 4 ladies who I have invited to have this discussion with me. I will ask them to introduce themselves, and I'll start from the left.
My name is Farisi Saitakawarasha.
My name is Mrs. Alice Mafanuke.
My name is Linda Gumbochuma.
My name is Kate Shangwa.
All right. Thank you, ladies. So as you'll see, these ladies are of completely different age groups, and I have invited them here so that as we get into our discussion, we can get a representation and a better insight from their different generations of how this topic affects them. So just a reminder, today our theme is bringing peace home, and we are specifically talking about youth abuse at home. This morning, we were introduced to some of the statistics as written by the World Health Organization. Before we get started, let us close our eyes for prayer. Thank you, dear Jesus, for bringing us together. Thank you for this program that we are about to have, and thank you for bringing us here today. As we are about to start, we ask that your Holy Spirit may be amongst us, and we ask that the words that we'll speak will be words that come from you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you once again, ladies, for joining us. We are talking about youth abuse at home, and our general theme is bringing peace home. So, this morning during Sabbath school, we were introduced by Mrs. Gumbochuma to some of the statistics from the World Health Organization relating to youth abuse in general, even before we began speaking about the daily challenges that they face, which we will now attribute to the abuse at home. Today, we want to talk about that some more, giving a more practical view of it. So when we look at the statistics, what we are looking at may not be as practical because it's not happening directly to us. So this afternoon, we want to talk about some of the issues that happen. For our viewers, we'd like to ask you to prepare to be exposed, prepare to feel like you're being judged, prepare to feel a bit angry, because this is an issue that maybe some of us don't even realize that we are doing. We may not realize that we may be abusing some of our youth at home. She may not realize that as a parent to me, she may have done something. And today we just want to talk about some of those things that we may do unawares, but yet they are contributing to our youth feeling like we are abusing them at home. It's also a lesson for me as a young mom, also a lesson for you who's raising children who are almost teenagers, to know where we can do it better. So, to begin, I will start with you, Kate. I want you to talk to us about some of the ways that parents can unknowingly abuse youth emotionally and psychologically.
Okay, good afternoon, church. I'm going to touch on emotional and psychological abuse. I thought to start up the conversation, I could define. Emotional abuse in the home happens when a child is repeatedly made to feel worthless, unloved, and alone. It is also known as psychological or verbal abuse. It is the most common form of child abuse, and it can include constant rejection, neglect, hostility, teasing, bullying, yelling, and criticism, and also exposure to family violence. The main distinguishing factor between the two is that psychological abuse has a stronger effect. The main distinguishing factor between the two is that psychological abuse has stronger effects on victims' mental capacity. So, while emotional abuse affects what people feel, psychological abuse has effects on what people think. This afternoon I've decided to focus on the signs of emotional abuse in child-parent relationship. I'm going to start with the child's emotions being invalidated in the home. The first rule of emotional abusive households is often that emotional exchange is one way. The child's own emotions are not relevant and are seen as competitive to that of the parents. So parents who have this problem have a tendency of big emotional displays over normal everyday things. For example, a parent can call their child names because they've tripped over a carpet, or they can accuse their kids of overreacting if they cry or get angry in response to the parents' rage. So most of the kids can grow up with a distinct sense that their emotions aren't real or valid.
Okay, maybe what I take it. Are you saying, because when you talk about the issue of, maybe a child has
Tripped
over and maybe they have done something, then the mother just says some words that can actually end up affecting them. But what were you doing? Were you not seeing where you were going? Those kind of expressions and things that we normally do as parents. Are you then saying that when parents do that, when you start calling children names that you don't even look where you're going, are you saying those are some of the form of abuses that we could actually be doing to our youths?
Yes. In as much as it is normal for parents to get angry because they're not perfect, they're also human beings, there is a problem now when it comes a consistent behavior where a parent is always shouting and calling their kid names. It has an emotional effect on them.
Okay. And maybe I guess some of the things that we would say, like, oh, wakafana tete wako, or like your father, this one just as stupid as the father, or as dumb as the sister.
Yeah.
Okay. It actually sticks to the mind of the child.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very true. I wanted to just give an example of how name calling can turn into your behavior. I just want to give you a practical example right here. Fari, your name is Fari Sisai, right? Mama, your second name is Fari Sisai. If you look at your character, generally, you are a happy person. Because you are constantly reminded that your name comes with happiness. Look at people who are named Farai. How many Farais do you know who are depressed or who generally have a low spirit? They're generally very happy people. You will see that most of the names that we have given our children, the delights, are happy people. They also come with their character. So it's very important how we relate to each other every day. Even people who've been told when they go to school, kutuwakapusa, or you don't think, or you don't pay attention, you will realize that as they grow, they really tend not to pay attention. Then when you ask them later on, why do you do this? They can tell you that, well, everyone grew up telling me that I'll always be last in class, so I'm always last at everything. I don't expect myself to do better. So they even lower their own expectations. So coming to what she was talking about, it's very important how as parents we talk to our children because we are shaping their characters. I know we always say that a child's character is only shaped from 0 to 5, but it's shaped even beyond 5. Even when I am now at my age, I still look to you for certain things, and the way that you will relate to me will tell me my value. So I believe that's where she was coming from with that. So emotional and physical abuse, I don't know if you, and psychological. You also spoke about neglect, maybe coming from your generation and your generation. Maybe you could talk to us about how, when we're talking about neglect, we are saying that you are making someone's feelings feel unimportant, or when someone says something to which you feel may not be important, you could tell you may not understand the importance, so you're very quick to tell them to get over it or to tell them that it's not important. Maybe talk to us a bit about why sometimes you don't want us to dwell on something too much, and you'd rather tell us to say, just leave it, it doesn't matter.
Well, I guess that's this whole thing, I think, is, like you say, is to do with the generations, how people grew up and how we were brought up. Because in our generation, pain was part of life. So, making decisions and, deciding not to do something because based on pain was just unheard of because it was just like part and parcel of life. It's normal. Get over it and go. Why do you have to sit down and start saying, oh, this is too painful if I just say, "Ay, Baba na bari benzi." Those things never seemed to be things that we thought in our generation would actually affect someone.
It was normal.
So I guess maybe for my generation, it's a lesson that we also need to learn, that the words we actually say, when you say to a child, you're like your father, or you're like your auntie, or you're like what, or you're behaving in a stupid way, or when we use those words, stupid, you didn't think, that is actually hurts. Because actually when we were growing up, those things were kind of like normal. I think even when our parents did those things, probably they were thinking by highlighting them that way, they were actually helping us to be better people. But I guess from what you guys are now teaching us, this is an area that we also need to change. That's why we're saying end it now.
Yeah.
So that if there is a parent who is just hitting a child and calling them names, thinking it's okay, now we know that it's not okay. So I guess that's the purpose of addressing parents in my generation, so that we know how to actually
how to parent our how to parent the grandchildren.
Yes, properly. And the grandchildren might not, because unfortunately, in our generation, the grandchildren, we tend to spoil them.
Yeah.
More than actually disciplining them.
Yeah.
But so now actually is to teach us to know that we were wrong when we did these things to our children. Maybe it's an apology that we need to give to our children. Sorry. We thought we were doing it right, but
we were wrong.
Saying this has effects on generations to come for the children. And I think for you guys, as you are now also raising your children, and those are the mothers who are out there in the church who probably could have the same kind of thinking as the one that I have grown up with, to say, never call your child any name. If you say to them, "Wagapusa," you amount to nothing, it means we are emotionally abusing them. And we are making these youths who end up being part of the statistics that we said today because of the way they were brought up from the homes. Then it means we are not making it any better. So that's why we really have to end it now.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here to be able to say all these things, which we may not have had if you were not here. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Kate, in terms of emotional and psychological abuse, or we can move on.
No, I don't have any more additions on this, but I have more signs that we can look at. Another sign is that parents use put-downs frequently. It's almost the same as what we were discussing before. The key part of emotional abuse is that it's usually a pattern. Situations where parents snap or is rude to their children are not necessarily characterized as emotional abuse, as I was explaining before, that as parents they are not perfect, they are also humans. But repetitive insults and put-downs can turn into emotional abuse. This can be speaking hurtful words that can break their children's hearts, cast blame, and making them lose their self-worth. An example of such phrases could be, "I wish you weren't born," "I wish you were more like your sister," and things like that.
Okay, we can continue.
Another...
I think maybe there's an important point that you've highlighted there, which is that in terms of parents, like I know in my generation, I don't know if in your generation you guys are doing that, maybe Linda's generation, I don't know, where you tend as a parent to want your children to do good like the other child. Maybe take, for example, if the other child is doing very well, you want everyone else to be the same, or rather to say, as parents, we expect all our children to be the same. I think that's another area that maybe we need to just be careful of as parents, to know that children are not the same. They are different. So you can't then say to your child, "I wish you could be like your sister," or "I wish you could be like so-and-so." Because by doing that, the child is going to start feeling they are not okay, something is wrong with them.
Enough.
And maybe it's the sister who is better. But so I think that's an area that we just brought across, which I think is important to highlight. So thank you for that.
Yeah, maybe on that same note, I've also learned something. As parents, we are not supposed to compare our children. I've learned that from my daughter. she's very intelligent, Auntie. She's an A student, Auntie. So my son, it's becoming a challenge to my son that at school the teachers compare him to the sister, right? So they always say to him, why don't you do like Lisa?
Like your sister.
Why don't you behave like your sister? So it has actually affected him so much, such that he even said to us as parents, you know what, I'm not going to understand where Lisa is, because all the teachers, they'll end up comparing me. They'll always say, why don't you do like your sister? So it's actually a very big lesson to us. It's a challenge to us as parents, that we are supposed to treat our kids differently. They've got different talents, right? They've got different ways of doing things. Lisa may be intelligent, but Nyasha maybe he actually has got what can I say?
Another area where he excels.
Yes.
It may not be.
It may not be education. Yes. So it's actually a big lesson to us as parents.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on, another sign is that the parent is emotionally manipulative. A lot of adults can be familiar to this type of emotional abuse when it comes to their romantic partners, where they can be telling them things like, you never find someone else who can love me the way that I do, you are not good enough, or things like that. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's also similar in the parent-to-child relationship, where parents can say to their kids, you know, you're very lucky to have us, or those other kids have much it worse than you do. So the experience of growing up with one of these parents is dominated by the feeling that emotional process is controlled by others. Moving on, the parent places inappropriate expectations on the child. The child faces emotional obstacles and requirements, for example, taking care of an adult. In cases where a parent can be someone who abuses substances, and now the child has to take on the parent role. The child faces emotional obstacles and requirements. For example, a child having to take care of their own parent may be in an instance where a parent abuses substances and the child now has to take the parent role. And another example of this is that a parent places ideas about a child's behavior that runs contrary to the way that children actually function. For example, you can find a parent who expects their child to master a particular thing, maybe that someone can take about a year to master, and they want them to get it to do it perfectly in a month or so. And this is very unrealistic, and it cannot be maintained. So these children end up having problems emotionally. And another sign that I have here is that parents don't apologize. I know this is a very controversial topic when it comes to our Zimbabwean culture. Emotionally abusive parents lack the willingness to acknowledge when they are wrong. And this means that they might apologize with words, but they might not necessarily change the behavior.
No, don't move on. That one we need to talk about it. There is power in apologizing when you are wrong. Before we even get to apologizing from parent to child, think about it from person to person. How much better you feel when someone has apologized when they've done you wrong. You know, you feel vindicated, you feel validated, you feel like, okay, at least they realize that they are wrong.
They're wrong.
Imagine when it's now parent to child. Your face. Imagine when it's now parent to child, how important it is to our children to apologize. I'll give you a practical example. I apologized to my daughter. She's 4 years old. You know, homeschooling can really test your patience, you know, because there's just so much that goes into making sure that you're on the same page. And we were in the midst of homeschooling. It was the day for submission for school, and I realized that we hadn't done something. So first of all, we hadn't done it on time. And then secondly, we are now rushing to get it done. And I remember as I was about to leave, I was saying to her, you're not serious because we learned this yesterday. Why are you getting it wrong today? I got to school and I handed in her work to a teacher, and I was expressing my frustration to her teacher. And her teacher said to me, your daughter is in my top 3 students. She is very intelligent. And here I am telling her, my daughter is not intelligent at all. She's not getting it right. And she said to me, you need to go home and apologize to your child because first of all, you are being a perfectionist. Secondly, you want her to be as good as you were when you were her age. You're not giving her a chance to be herself. And then thirdly, you're not acknowledging the effort that she has put. Then finally, it's also frustrating for her to do the same thing every single day. So you need to find more innovative ways of saying it. So I left the teacher's office feeling like I am the one who was the student who was reprimanded. I went home and I said sorry to my daughter. Everything in me was saying, don't say sorry, because she was playing. You know, she was supposed to get it right. But I got home, and I think towards the end of the day is when I finally sat down with her and I said to her, you know what, in the morning I said to you that you're playing with school, and I said whatever I said, and I'm sorry. I spoke to your teacher and she told me that you're actually, you know, in her top students, you're doing very well. I gave her a sticker and I gave her a hug. And what she said to me made me really feel bad, because she turned to me and she said, it's okay, Mom, I understand. You know, those words, she literally said, it's okay, Mom, I understand. And then she gave me a hug back. The effect of my apology the following day when we were doing school, I saw it. She was more inclined to do what we did the previous day, because now I had apologized for where I went wrong. So it's very important for us as parents to learn to apologize where we are wrong. Sometimes, I know these days we may want our parents to apologize over something that they don't need to apologize for. My parents should not apologize for disciplining me in something that I was not supposed to do. So where there is need for an apology is important. And it goes a long way into the character development of our children. A child will not say sorry if they never grow up hearing the word sorry.
It's true.
Because to them, it's foreign. There's no need. They're always right. And it's children like that who are a serious menace to other children, because they never acknowledge where they've gone wrong. My Gumbo Chuma, do you say sorry to your children?
I've learned to say sorry because I've noticed that every time I say sorry to my child, I'm actually instilling something in him. Every time he's wrong, he quickly says sorry.
Yes.
So saying sorry, it helps our children to have those good manners when they grow up.
You know, Amanda, I like something. I like that you were able to apologize to your 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Because age is also an issue. Some parents might think that just because this child is still young, they probably don't even, it won't affect them in any way. But you knowing that a 4-year-old also needs to hear a story, you know, it is very encouraging, you know, because that child is going to grow up knowing that it's important to apologize.
Say,
That's true.
I guess I can put in a word for parents my generation. I'm sure parents my generation out there, you know that we, with our pride as parents, that's something that we'd never do. Yes, you would realize that actually what I've done here, I think I've overstepped my discipline with this child, or maybe, I was wrong there. But it's rare. I'm sure they are there. We could find some in our generation who would go and say sorry. Like I know my husband would easily do that and say sorry to his children, but not me. I'm not the type that would probably say that. Because normally then you'd say, you know, look at a child, man. If I did that, okay, fine, so what? You know, you don't really want to go and show that side of your weakness with the child. You want to always maintain the upper hand, because we always had this thing growing up that if you show signs of weakness to a child as a parent, then it means at the end of the day, parent and child are on the same level. So I always have to keep that upper hand of saying, I'm the parent, I'm the one who died. Whether I am wrong or I am right, that's another story. You are the child, all you do is listen to me. But unfortunately, we didn't know that by doing that, we're actually abusing our children and we're actually instilling other values which are not correct. So I think, for those who are like me or those out there in my generation, I think this is a point of something. Well, of course, now I'm done parenting. My children are all big now. But however, it's a good point for me to know that we need to learn to apologize to our children, when they've done something wrong. So if there should be any parent out there who probably was doing their parenting my way and not apologizing when they've done something wrong by just doing something nice to show the child that we are sorry, but not directly saying I'm sorry, I think it's time that we need to change. We should end it now and not continue being perpetrators of abuse for our children, and we should say sorry. Thank you for that.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay, so I'll move on. Another sign that I have here is that the parent isolates the child. Isolation is a key part of emotional abuse parents' arsenal, whether it's done as a way of shielding the child or trying to protect them from the world. Growing up, I've seen some children from other families where they're not allowed to go and play with other kids, and I can say they were not really allowed to be kids. I never really thought that could be a problem, or we could categorize it under emotional abuse. So that's something that we should also. Another sign is that the parent is just plain terrifying. Feeling constantly threatened as a child because the environment created by the parent is emotionally abusive. Even if it doesn't get emotional, parents will scream, threaten, deliberately, physically impose and use their child's fear as a method of controlling or behaving in an emotionally abusive manner. I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
Well, thank you very much for highlighting those points. I think we've all learned one or two things. I may want to just clarify on isolation, that I think it's not always that isolation is meant for the harm of the child. In the environment where we are now, there are a lot of terrible influences that are outside. And as parents, there are times where we may decide to play the mean card and isolate our child because we can see that the influence outside will only make them worse. So I know that there are parents who may not want their children to, especially if they stay in certain locations where playing outside equals bad morals, they are actually doing it for the good of their child, not necessarily to stop them from being children. So the ability to remain a child will be there, but the parent can say, let your friends come here instead, because they do not trust the environment where those friends naturally reside. So it may be something. I know, for example, in your style of parenting, because of the area where we stayed then, being outside and playing outside the gate the whole afternoon would have led to serious character flaws in us. So you would have rather preferred that other children come inside our gate and play with us. There's also isolation where it comes to things like sleepovers, things like spending the night away from home, things like going to other people's houses. We no longer know what happens with certain people. And something that I know that parents have done mostly is say, let me know the parents of that child as well, so that we see the kind of morals that they hold before we allow our children to go and spend time with them and mingle. So I think it's a point that we need to note that it's not all isolation which is bad. There's also good isolation for the betterment of the child. Moving on, Fari, I want to come to you and ask you to speak to us about physical and spiritual abuse.
All right, Amanda, this one's going to ruffle some feathers.
Okay.
It's a very controversial one. Let me start with spiritual abuse. Okay, so the definition of spiritual abuse is when you're using your religious beliefs to either control a person or to condone other forms of abuse, right? And so on spiritual abuse, right, I will marry it with physical abuse. Physical abuse, an example can be beating your child, right? There's a certain verse that some of our youth do not want to see in the Bible because we have a very negative relationship with that verse. Spare the rod and spoil the child. Because it was used to condone some beatings that maybe children felt that were not necessary, you know. There were situations where children, after receiving their report card, you know, they'll go home and then parents will beat them because they didn't reach their expectations, you know. And to me, I feel as if that is not the way to go, because maybe this child has a learning disability, you know, and then you set up these expectations for them and then they can't meet them, then you beat them up, you know. And also on physical abuse, there's an element of going too far with the beatings, right? So one, there's beating these children for reasons that may not need a beating. And then also beating them to a level that is taking it too far. You know, I think a lot of our parents, maybe they think just because I'm the parent and I'm beating you, the Bible says I should not spare the rod, you know. So I think parents must actually also incorporate other methods of disciplining, because there's no one universal one that works, you know, there are so many. And also going on to spiritual abuse, there's one maybe that a lot of our Christian, maybe Adventist parents do not want to hear, but forcing children to go to church could be a form of spiritual abuse.
Thank you for saying could be, because you haven't said is. You said it could be, leaving it open enough for us to discuss it. I hope that's where you were going with that.
Yes, we need dialogue, because this one is a bit tricky.
Yes.
Right? I'll give an example of parents who will say to their children, in this home, this is an Adventist home, you never go to another church if you want to still stay in my home. Or maybe let's talk of one that is more relatable. A parent will say, we are going to church today. If you do not want to go to church, I don't know, you're not going to live in my home, you know. So one, we're creating a very negative relationship between children and church, right? Because church is a forced issue. I don't love church, I just have to go to church, you know. So I don't know, I will ask Mama Fanuki, where do you draw the line, right? Between you need to force a child to, where do we draw the line? Between forcing a child to go to church and also giving them the freedom to actually love church for themselves.
I guess that's right. It's a tricky area, because, you know, as parents, we are expected to let our children grow up doing the right thing. So you can imagine if I am going to allow you to just do what you want, to say today you don't feel like going to church. I don't know how many youths will be having in this stage. There probably be no one, maybe one or two, because most of them would rather stay at home and sleep. They don't feel like going to church. So that's part of parenting, where some of those things you guys are just going to have to live with. Well, I don't know how bad of an impact it would be in terms of the effect of abuse, because, you know, we are learning today about some of these practices that we have been growing up thinking they are right. Maybe in the meantime we're actually doing it wrong, because maybe that could be part of the reasons why then, when you guys feel you are now older, you want to quickly make sure that you have nothing to do with church and you want to just run away, because you are no longer forced by a parent or anyone to come to church. But it's very difficult to strike the balance. What we desire as your parents is that at least when we are forcing you to say you are coming to church, whether you like it or not, our desire is that in the process of coming to church, you can at least get to learn the good things that you find in going to church, and hoping that in the process you can grasp them for your own self. so that it becomes your own lifestyle, your own conviction. So the reason why we then force you is because we are saying you come to the right place so that you can hear the right things and make the right decision. So that's really basically the reason why we end up doing the forcing. But that there could be any other way. I still have reservations because we still need to let you guys come to church, go to the right environment, and hopefully learn the right thing. I don't know, it's open to you guys to teach us. But that's where we are coming from in our generation when we say to you, come to church. Because we know that the natural thing in a youth is to remain home and sleep on a Sabbath.
Yeah.
But then we are saying no, and also the Bible says to me, like you have said, maybe it could be spiritual abuse, but the Bible says to me, everyone in my home is supposed to keep the Sabbath.
Yes.
And it's a Sabbath, and you guys have to come with me to church. Okay.
Because it's also train up a child in the way that they should go. I think the only part where we may need to improve is we do not give reason for certain things. So, for example, it's we don't eat pork, we don't drink alcohol, we don't put nail polish, we don't put this. Like it's a rule. It's not an explained rule as to go further by saying we do not drink alcohol because it will hurt your organs, and then we go deep into it and help each other understand. So I think where we would then begin it as a health message that we discourage this and that because it has these and these effects. I'm still on the it could be abuse. I know that as I'm going to parent my children, it's not even an option. We are going to church on Saturday, all of us. If you don't want to, you'll see it when you get married. That's going to be our house. I'm still learning. Yes, we are learning how it could be abused, but then I am taking it from train up a child in the way that he should go. Sometimes, if you think about it, the things that you are exposed to are what shape you. So the more you are exposed to spending your Saturday at church, learning more about God will shape the type of character that you have. If I'm going to spend Sabbath school, divine service, afternoon service, progressive classes, my day is filled with getting to know more about God, and I actually intentionally want to do that. Then as I get older, when I face other temptations, this foundation will help me with those temptations. And I believe that's where the parents come from when they say, in my house, we go to church on Saturday. Because God gave them that instruction. As long as you're calling yourself a Christian, everyone who is in your home must also follow what you want them to follow. Remember Exodus, when it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. It says, everyone within thy gates shall observe the Sabbath. If my mother is to now leave me to say, I do not want to observe the Sabbath today, she has broken the commandment. Because the commandment has said to her that as long as I am within her gates, I am to observe the Sabbath with her. Where I say we may do it better is there are ways of improving it in such a way that we are understanding each other. But there may be places where we must agree to disagree. So when it comes to parent and child, there must be times where Alina must agree to disagree with me, especially when it comes to the principles that we hold in a family. Mike Gumbachuma, what do you have to say about this issue, about spiritual and physical? It was physical, right?
Yes.
Spiritual and physical abuse. Nothing.
No comment.
Kate, do you have something to say? Okay.
I guess on physical abuse, I'd say yes. I think we have seen lately, even on social media, children who are being abused through the beating that we do. I know when we grew up, the beating was really such a serious part of disciplining that we needed to really beat up a child, you know. Like I know, I remember simple instances that when people of my generation who were raised by mothers in our generation, they will tell you that if your mother said to you, bring me a cup of water, you bring the cup of water and she will look at the cup. If on the handle of the water, of the cup, there is some dirt there, that water is going to land on your face or even the cup itself. That's how the mothers would do the discipline. I'm sure all of us, our generation, we were raised that way. Well, when we were raising you guys up, we didn't perpetrate that one because we did see it's evil. But the thing is, beating seems to be part and parcel of bringing up a child. But I do agree that maybe now, as parents, we need to really go easy on the beating. Because I think there are times when a parent beat up a child in their anger, and then when you beat the child in the anger, sometimes you end up even killing them. Because I know we've read incidents in the newspapers where parents have actually killed their own child because they are beating the child in anger. Now, the book Child Guidance gives counsel that when you are going to discipline a child, you must take the child, sit them down, and pray first. I never practiced that because I didn't think that that's something that I thought would be effective. But that's what it's supposed to be. Because by the time you finish praying, your own anger as a mother would have subsided as a parent. And then by the time now you say to the child, I'm now beating you up. You are now beating it up with the control of the Holy Spirit because you have both given yourself over to God.
With
so that's ideally how we're supposed to do it. So I think it's a lesson that we need to start practicing as parents, to know that it's not the beating that's going to really bring in the discipline. We can go, what can I say? We can trim it down. Yes, we still need to beat you, maybe here and there, but not all the time.
Yeah.
I know there was a lady who gave me a very good counsel when it came to beating, and she said, you know what? The reason why you keep beating your child all the time is because when you actually do the beating, you don't really beat them. You do just that light beating. So, just say, what have you done? I'm going to beat you. You take a stick and you beat. But then she says, no, if you beat a child, they will know what you mean when you say beating. And then when you do that, you discover that you only beat a child once in their lifetime. Because they'll just know that, that beating was painful. You know what I mean? But still, even in that beating, we have to be very careful because we shouldn't really be seen using that force because it affects the child. As you have rightly spoken, that it is a form of abuse that we are practicing in Christian homes, using the word spare the rod and spoil the child. Yes, the rod must be used, but it has to be used properly. And we need to pray first and we explain to the child.
Yes.
One aspect which I wanted to really bring or talk about on the issue of spiritual abuse that you talked about is the explaining. I think as parents, we need ourselves to learn to know why is it that we don't put earrings as Adventists, so that at least then, when I know why I am not putting on earrings, I shouldn't put in, and it's easy for me then to be able to explain to you. So I think it's a point of learning for us parents, that every parent should know the reasons why the Adventist beliefs that we have, why you have them.
Yes.
So that when you know the reason, you are able to explain to your child. Because if I wait for you to be taught in adventurous class, then you might not understand it earlier, or maybe your teacher might not even cover it. And yet, if I had covered it at home, it will help you to understand why I am saying to you, we are going to church on Sabbath, whether you like it or not, and why I am saying we do not put on earrings as Adventists because of ABC. So I think it's the learning and explaining part which we need to improve on, so that we can end this issue of spiritual abuse with our children, is the explaining at home.
Learning and explaining is very important. Has someone ever asked you a question that you don't have an answer for, especially a child? You get very agitated. Because you don't know.
Yes.
And to close off the discussion, you quickly you become mean, and then it's gone. But what you've done is you've instilled fear in the child, so they can no longer openly come to you and discuss certain things. So it's important for us to know, to learn our fundamental beliefs. Why do we believe what we believe in? Okay. Thank you very much, Fari. You were done, were you?
No, I just wanted to maybe sum up the two that I was talking about. On physical abuse, I think it's also something that, when a parent is beating a child, some parents will just take any nearest object and just hit the child. I think there are actually laws that say you shouldn't hit a child with your hands or certain objects, When you're starting to inflict any physical harm, right, and there's a problem there. When your child now has bruises and cuts and scars, so that's something that you need to be careful of. And on spiritual abuse, I think what we need to do is, the problem starts from home. The youth we're losing youth in the church. It's because of how we built a relationship with church. So I think it's important that we build this relationship upon love and not fear and force. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you very much for that, Fari.
I think, okay, where it becomes different for me with parenting is that in my parenting, when it came to God, on spiritual abuse, I made sure that whatever I understood or believed about God, I also passed it on to my children. And so as I was talking to them about God, I would explain to them things that were happening in my life, how I understood God. And so take, for example, if I had a tough day that day at work, I'll then say to my children when we're having evening prayer time, I'll then tell them, today I had this difficult situation, and this is what I did. I prayed to God, and this is what God did for me. So that at least that way it made my children to know that God is real. He's part of our life. When we talk about God, it's not something that we are reading from the Bible, something that we are learning at church, but something that is actually part and parcel of our life. So on spiritual abuse, I think that's how I handled it, that at least I tried to explain everything that I knew about God to my children, simplifying it to their ages, right from the time they were young. I did prayers with them daily, consistently, to make sure that at least this is something that they know is part and parcel of our life.
I think just to bring the practicality of that and how it translates into adult life since I'm here, then I can also say that it helped the understanding of God to become so much better, because also I remember we used to have a time where every night we were studying. I think we took that big black Bible and we went to the back of it where there were lessons. We learned about the state of the dead, we learned about the Sabbath, we learned about different things, and you allowed us to ask different questions. And I remember a particular day where we, instead of our prayer session lasting 30 minutes, it went almost an hour, because we were talking about foreknowledge and predestination.
Yes.
And now, 30 years later, it's still something that we debate about, predestination and foreknowledge. But one thing that I know that we learned, especially growing up with you and Daddy as our parents, is the importance of learning about God together. So you did not speak down to us about who God is, but you taught us together with yourselves about who God is. So when there was a topic that we didn't understand, it was homework for tomorrow's worship time to say, let's go and read about the Sabbath, this particular area that we don't understand, then let's come and talk about it tomorrow. That way we all grew spiritually, and then it really helped us. Then maybe you can give us a practical example about discipline, physical abuse and discipline. How did you do it for us?
Okay, well, it's tricky because I used to beat my children. I think the one who got the worst brand was Anna, and I think and Brian. James, I didn't really beat him much, but
Anna and Brian.
Anna and Brian. James was being beaten by it more often than he was being beaten by me. But I did use the rod, but I had also to always be careful to know that when I use the rod, I use it properly. And after I told you that incident where I said one lady told me about beating properly, after I did that, then I didn't need to be beating all the time, because then the child was like, if I'm going to be beaten, this beating is going to be a real painful one. And you know how it is normally with the elder children normally get the brunt of beating, because you want them to also give the example of the younger ones. So I think the firstborns and secondborns tend to have a whole lot more discipline than those who are at the end tail. Tail end.
All right, that's fine. Okay. I wouldn't know how to answer that. I think for me, how you disciplined me, you explained everything and the consequence of doing it. So you would say, don't do this, because when you do it, I'm going to hit you. Then I would see you hitting Anna or James for it, and then I would say, no, I'm not getting myself into this situation. Maybe that's what saved me from your stick. It hasn't landed on me yet. But I think your explanation went a long way. I learned from another lady that when you are disciplining your child, taking further from your issue of explanation, tell them that I'm giving you 3 chances. I don't know if you can say it like that. So you can tell them the first time, I don't want you to do this because of this, this, and that. You can tell them the second time, I told you last time that don't do this. You've done it again. And I do not want you to do this because very soon it's going to become part of your character, and it will be more difficult for us to take it out. The next time you do it, I'm hitting you. The next time that they do it, be sure to say, I've told you twice before, and I told you that the third time it's landing in us hitting each other. Then together, go and select the best utensil for the discipline. If that utensil is going to be 2 fingers that will flick, if it's going to be chumuti chepanze, if it's going to be a belt, whatever you're going to be using for discipline that day, select it together. In the process of walking from the point of occurrence to the point of picking up the utensil, you are both cooling down as you're explaining to the child, they are understanding that my past behavior and this behavior has led to us coming to this point where my mother now needs to use something to discipline me. And you have also sort of calmed down. I guess then comes to your prayer where as you pray, God will also give you restraint to be able to discipline your child in a way that they've understood by your words, and then the follow-up action has helped them to say, I'm not getting myself back into this situation again. Thank you, Fari, for physical and spiritual abuse. And just finally, Mai Gumbochuma, please speak to us about sexual abuse in the home. It's something that people don't really talk about because I think we have taught ourselves that in our Adventist homes we don't face sexual abuse, but unfortunately concealing it is not making it go away. Concealing something doesn't mean the absence of it. So talk to us about sexual abuse in the home.
Okay, there's a lot that is going on in the Adventist home or in the Christian home. A lot of children are being abused. Children are being abused by their own fathers, their uncles. And also in our culture, there are still a lot of people that are still practicing chiram. And they,
I guess you could say chiramo is where we say sekuru ne muzukuru, muzukuru mukadzi wa sekuru, something like that.
Okay. In our traditional culture, you find that there are still people that are still practicing chiramu, whereby murume wa tete anoda kubata mainini mazamu. Those things are still existing today. You find a whole big man with a wife, achibata mwana mdiki, who is just 16 years. So those are some of the things that are happening in the home, of which they are not good, especially for us Christians. And children are being abused through that. So we are saying to people out there, let's end it now as women and children.
And I guess it's not only physical, sometimes it's even in the words, where you could find that someone older may call a younger child my wife. That breeds, that's what leads to the guts to be able to touch someone. It begins from the words that they speak. And children are looking to their parents to say something to this person who's calling me their wife, or say something to this person who's commenting on my body structure, or say something to this person who is crossing a line that they should not cross. And I guess as parents, because culture has taught us that you shouldn't always speak up about certain things, we make it quiet, but it's to the detriment of our children. But thank you I don't know if you have anything to add, Mama.
Yeah, that's a point. Because like when you talk about this issue of Rambo, or where you said people keeping on calling someone my wife, I think that's a practice that we need to stop, especially as Christians, that we shouldn't even be encouraging it. Because I know that if I would see Fari, then I would say, oh, this is Mrs. Mafanuke. Because I said, no, you are now the wife of Mafanuke, where I am, that's where you are also, because you are my brother's daughter. So those things, even when we say it, we don't really mean it in the literal term. You know what I mean? To say, oh, But when we say it, totally like it's just joking, like it's just something that is said, even maybe by the father or by whoever. But in the meantime, little do we realize that some of those things, they are actually abusive, because then maybe it's affecting Fari's mind. But with us, we'll be thinking, so what? It's not a big deal. We're just joking. It's just part of the culture where we just say these things, expressing them, but not necessarily really saying, take this man and let him be your wife, or let him be your husband. Or where the husband now has to start touching Fari, or things like that. But I think that's a point that we have brought in. I think maybe as Christians, as Adventists, we need to stop those cultural practices where we say these things so lightly. Because then in that saying lightly, we start putting ideas in some men whose minds are not okay, who end up now wanting to go further and start practicing sexual abuse to the ladies or the children that we're actually talking about. So I agree, we need to end it now and not even mention those things in our discussions, even jokingly. I think we need to stop doing that. Okay.
Thank you very much for joining me, ladies. Kate, for talking about psychological and emotional abuse. I think there are a lot of lessons that we picked there, and a lot of improvements that are there for us as parents. Mrs. Kumbuchuma for speaking to us about sexual abuse in the home. Fari for speaking to us about physical and spiritual abuse, and Mrs. Mafanuke for being here to give us a perspective that comes from your generation. It has also helped us to understand why certain people act the way that they may act. It may not be that it's malicious, but it's also how they were raised, so to them it's normal. But I hope that all of us have learned something here. The emphasis that we wanted to bring out is that end it now. It should come to an end. It should not be something that we say, I'll start to do it next week or when they are now a teenager. It's something that we need to stop now.
Unaneta moyo wako yere, muze Jesu, unasua ne urombo yere, muze Jesu yega, muze Jesu, shamari wazikanwa, wakuchina umewakadaro, muze Jesu yega, masonzi ari kudona yere, muze Jesu, muneshite mazawikwa yere, muze Jesu yega, muze Jesu, shamari wazikanwa, wakuchina umewakadaro, muze Jesu yega, muri kuchka dambuzoro yere, muze Jesu, iye ucha kubatsira iwe, muze Jesu yega, muze Jesu, shamari wazikanwa, wakuchina umewakadaro, muze Jesu yega, wacharufu lunouya here, muze Jesu, unadisa umambo wa Jesu, muze Jesu yega, muze Jesu, shamari wazikanwa, wakuchina umewakadaro, muze Jesu yega, muze Jesu, shamari wazikanwa, wakuchina umewakadaro, muze Jesu yega. Kuwaye kunama moyo unofawa touya kuna Jesu onesi wedu nekutenda touya kuchishangu chedu ora pawa makaneta shakana kakuwayo mukuna mata tinokomborerwa ora pawa makaneta shakana kakuwayo nguwa yekuna mata tenzi oswedera anetsitsi kunzwa vana vachichema zvese tinozviisa pamakumbo ake ora pawa makaneta zvakanaka kuwayo mukuna mata tinokomborerwa ora pawa makaneta zvakanaka kuwayo nguwa yekuna mata apo vanoyedzwa toisa kuna tenzi vanobatsira nemoyo wekunzwira obvisa zvinetso ora pawa kaneta zvakanaka kuwayo mukuna mata tinokomborerwa ora pawa kaneta zvakanaka kuwayo panguva yemunamato tinomusimbira zvikomborero zvese tinozviwana mukusimbira iye hamuna dambudzo ora pawa kaneta zvakanaka kuwayo mukuna mata tinokomborerwa ora pawa kaneta zvakanaka kuwayo mukuna mata tinokomborerwa ora pawa kaneta zvakanaka kuwayo. Tiri wana wa mambo, wa mambo, wa mambo. Tiri wana wa mambo, toimba parwendo. Jesu mutungamiri, isu hatichazotyi, titerere kwa ari, toimba parwendo. Tiri wana wa mambo, wa mambo, wa mambo. Tiri wana wa Jesu moto amiri Yesu atichazo chiterere kwa aritoi baba rendo tino yenda kumusha tino yenda kumusha toi baba rendo tino yenda kumusha apo kusinane ma Jesu alikupenya toi baba rendo geru faro toyenda geru faro toyenda toi baba rendo atiragi kuimba moyo kushinda dakarati no shika toi baba rendo geru faro toyenda geru faro toyenda toi baba rendo atilege kuimba moyo iri kushinga dakarati no shikanga toi baba rendo atilege kuimba moyo iri kushinga dakarati no shikanga toi baba rendo atilege kuimba moyo iri kushinga dakarati no shikanga toi baba rendo tenzi ari nombore dune chidziwiriro chedu tisache muzviro zvese nechidziwiriro chedu ngedombo rine masimba ngevute apotaneta ngewedu kutungamira nechidziwiriro chedu futeredu masikati nechidziwiriro chedu mekupenya pausiku nechidziwiriro chedu ngedombo rine masimba ngevute apotaneta ngewedu kutungamira nechidziwiriro chedu champupuri chatinera nechidziwiriro chedu kuna Mwari taponeswa nechidziwiriro chedu ngedombo rine masimba ngevute apotaneta ngewedu kutungamira nechidziwiriro chedu Omwari bakoredu nechidziwiriro chedu kuba batsiri muri pedyo nechidziviriro chedu rine masimba ngevute apotaneta ngewedu kutungamira nechidziviriro chedu rine masimba ngevute apotaneta ngewedu kutungamira nechidziviriro chedu rine masimba ngevute apotaneta ngewedu kutungamira nechidziviriro chedu.
Murapi mkuru uripo wemutandie Jesu anofarisa warombo inzwa izwira Jesu zitarake ritendwe zitarake rikutwe zitarake rimwe Jesu nde Jesu zitatoza sunungurwa inzwa izwira Jesu vambayina yekudenga tigereko na Jesu zitarake ritendwe zitarake rikutwe zitarake rimwe Jesu nde Jesu mbiri kunyenye ya mwari dinodawira Jesu dinodisazitairi ramuponesi Jesu zitarake ritendwe zitarake rikutwe zitarake rimwe Jesu nde Jesu zimwe ndatata ndinoda kunzwa zitara Jesu moyo wangu wanyaratswa ngezitaro ra Jesu zitarake ritendwe zitarake rikutwe zitarake rimwe Jesu nde Jesu aponie acha
inzwa inochema apo madaidza vamwe musandipfure ndipenyiwo wenyutsa ndinokumbira ndiri kumupfukamira nekudawira muponesi inzwa inochema apo madaidza vamwe musandipfure ndinomusimbira Jesu ndinokutsvaka rapanyiwa moyo wangu kundiponesa muponesi inzwa inochema apo madaidza vamwe musandipfure muri tsime rangu tenzi zvene upenyu akuchina mubatsiri asi Jesu muponesi